Morning. My name is Rocky Moretti. I'm the Director of Policy and Research with TRIP, a national transportation research nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. Welcome to today's webinar on the release of TRIP's new report in Montana. For reporters in attendance after the initial comments from myself and the other speakers, then we'll open it up for question and answers. My colleague, Carolyn Kelly, will facilitate those questions. If you have questions to ask, you can use the chat function or the raised hand function or the question and answer function, and we will elevate you to a panelist so that you can interact with the panelists in terms of any questions or follow-ups you may have. TRIP has been in operation for just over 50 years now. During that time, we've released over 600 reports at the national and state level, looking at the condition, the use, and the performance of the nation's transportation system. TRIP is supported by a coalition of manufacturing, insurance, construction, labor, and engineering organizations. They look to us to put out reports that put out the latest information on the use and condition of our transportation system. This report, Keep Montana Moving Forward, looks at the progress and challenges the state has achieved and faces in providing a 21st century transportation system, and is based on information that we received from a survey from the Montana Department of Transportation and also the Federal Highway Administration and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. The report points out that Montana continues to experience significant growth in population, in economic growth, and also in vehicle travel growth. Ensuring that Montana continues to grow is going to require that the state is able to continue, and also local governments are able to provide a well-maintained, efficient, and safe transportation system. The report notes that Montana's population since 2000 has increased by 22%, and that between 2000 and 2019, vehicle travel increased by 30%. We saw a significant dip in travel in Montana during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, but by 2021, vehicle travel in Montana was 7% higher than pre-COVID in 2019. So travel is back in Montana and at a higher rate than what we saw before COVID. In 2017, the legislature in Montana passed the Road Safety and Accountability Act, which increased funding for transportation by about $40 million a year, with about 2/3 of that funding going to local governments and the other third to state governments to make needed road, bridge, and highway improvements across the state. This additional money at the state level then was enhanced by additional funding from the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, passed at the end of 2021, which boosted federal funding coming to Montana for surface transportation by approximately 1/3. This additional fund has proven critical, allowing the state to move forward with a number of critical and significant projects, including addressing last year's flooding, which caused significant damage to roadways in the southwest and south central Montana area. The TRIP report also includes a list of the state's top 20 transportation challenges. These are needed transportation improvements that are, in many cases, the projects are ongoing. In other cases, they're being planned. There's really a mix of projects that are funded or still need additional funding. These include a number of critical improvements, including addressing the state's number of bridges that are restricted to lighter weight vehicles, improvements along US 191 from Four Corners to Beaver Creek, adding capacity on portions of Interstate 90 in the Billings area, improving pavement and bridges on Interstate 90 from St. Regis to Missoula, and improving pavements and interchanges on portions of Interstate 15 from Great Falls to Sweetgrass, as well as adding capacity on Interstate 90 in the Bozeman area, and also doing additional work on the Billings bypass. These are all absolutely vital to ensuring Montana's future in terms of having a reliable and safe transportation system, and also improving the condition of the system. The report also took a look at the latest data on pavement conditions in the state And this looks at both state maintained roadways and highways and also locally maintained. The report found that 13% of major roadways in the state have pavement in poor condition, and another 17% are in mediocre condition. In the Billings area, the report found that 32% of major roadways are rated in poor condition, and 21% are rated in mediocre condition. In the Great Falls area, the report found 31% of major roadways have pavement in poor condition, and 23% are rated in mediocre condition. The report found that in the Missoula area, 29% of major roadways are rated in poor condition, and 20% are rated in mediocre condition. The TRIP report found that driving on rough roads increases cost to motorists in terms of maintaining their vehicle, and we estimate that the average driver spending an additional $526 annually driving on rough roads in the state, a total of $427 million. The report also noted that 7% of Montana's bridges are rated in poor condition and 62% are rated in fair condition. The TRIP report also took a very close look at traffic safety in Montana. And the report finds that from 2017 to 2021, in that 5-year period, there were 1,008 traffic fatalities in the state, around 200 traffic deaths a year. Certainly, the Montana Department of Transportation, as all transportation agencies, are committed to reducing the number of traffic fatalities to zero, but this gives some indication of the challenges that are faced. The report also pointed out that from 2019 to 2021, there was a significant increase in traffic fatalities in Montana, with the number of fatalities increasing by 32% from 184 to 243 deaths. And unfortunately, the traffic fatality rate per 100 million miles of travel in Montana in 2021 was the 5th highest in the country. In early 2022, the U.S. Department of Transportation put out a comprehensive approach to improving roadway safety, which really puts together a comprehensive set of improvements that really have 5 objectives. The objectives include safer people, which means safer drivers, safer roads, very critically, which means making roads and highways as safe as possible, safer vehicles, having people traveling at safer speeds, and improving post-care crash. We think this is vital because there's not one solution to traffic safety. It really takes a comprehensive approach that really integrates not just the transportation agencies, but really all levels of government, and also there's a responsibility to the public. I'll end by pointing out that the state's economy is highly dependent on the state's transportation system, particularly its highways, with $82 billion in goods being moved annually. And the design and construction of the state's transportation system is supporting approximately 8,000 full-time jobs a year, and over 200,000 jobs in critical sectors of the Montana economy, including tourism, manufacturing, and agriculture, are critically reliant on the quality of our transportation system. With that, I'm going to call on 2 speakers. We're going to be hearing from the Director of the Montana Department of Transportation, Mac Long, and then we're also going to hear from David Smith, who's going to be speaking in representing the Montana Infrastructure Coalition. Director, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rocky. I appreciate it. Like you said, I'm Director Mac Long. I'm the Director of Montana Department of Transportation. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And we like what TRIP does. It helps bring information to light. We as a department are always trying to be as open as we can and work with TRIP, work with NTSB, work with our contractors, work with everyone, because we can't do it in a vacuum. We can't do what we do alone. And our whole goal is to, as you said, Rocky, make sure the roads are safe and maintained well, and we keep addressing the issues that are in front of us. We are unique as a state. We're the 4th largest state in the nation. We have thousands of miles of road that cover a very vast area, Montana, And it's like you said, we're seeing a lot of growth. We're seeing the growth mainly in the western part of the state, but all parts of the state are important and are seeing an influx of people. So it is important that we address, you've talked about some of our top issues, and that's important. Also, how we deal with both the other departments, agriculture, commerce, and how we deal with both the counties and the cities of Montana. So we have a big role in making sure we take care of as much as we can, working with everyone that we can.
Thank you. David?
Thanks, Rocky. So I am the president right now of the Montana Infrastructure Coalition, and the Infrastructure Coalition came together in 2015 and 16 as a hybrid of the Montana Chamber of Commerce, the Montana Contractors Association, as well as the League of Cities and Towns and MACO, and as a way of dealing together with our community's infrastructures. That group proceeded to work with the legislature in 2017, as Rocky mentioned earlier, passed the BARSA bill, which added additional funding for our roads. And it wasn't just for MDT roads, it's for cities and counties to apply for their use, and the locals. So I think that's about 65% goes actually back to the local cities and counties for them to use too. You know, along the way, there's been so much pressure, as you mentioned, Rocky, with the population and the vehicle counts growing too, that we're very nervous about what's ahead, and want to make sure that we have a good plan for that. Montana's in a lucky position that the federal government provides about 85 to 87% of the funding that's used by DOT. But that still means that we have to come up with 13 to 15% on our own. So that's why there is a state gas tax. And by putting that together, we're able to really lean into some of the funding sources that are out there. MDT has done a great job with their long-range strategic plan, which is in this report, and that has allowed more grant opportunities to come in. And by being able to have a plan ready to go, we are able to capitalize when another state doesn't use their funding. And just this past year, $119 million came to Montana in addition to our regular allocation that we can use for a lot of those projects. And some of it certainly is going to be eaten up by inflation and supply chain and materials and labor. But at the end of the day, we've got some pretty big issues to solve. There's 2,000 off-system bridges, and what that means is cities and counties, they're bridges that aren't on the federal highway system that Mac and his crew direct. So those are farm to market type roads. Those are our agricultural suppliers are trying to get across those small bridges, and because they are now load posted and can't handle more weight, we've got a lot of inventory that has to be dealt with in the form of 70 or 80-year-old bridges that are made of wooden timbers. So this is a forward-looking document that helps to address this and point it towards where those needs are. So it was great research by MDT to provide to TRIP and for TRIP to analyze it.
Thank you. Now I'll ask Carolyn to moderate questions that those tuning in might have.
Sure. Thanks, Rocky. As Rocky had noted earlier, we'll have a Q&A portion now where any of the media participants can ask questions of Director Long or of David. And the way you'll do that is you can either use the raise hand function down below or submit questions to the chat. Once you've done that, I will be able to promote those asking questions to the role of a panelist, and we'll be able to see you and you can ask your question directly. While we wait for some questions to come in, and I do see a couple now, I'll note that we'll have a recording of this news conference available on TRIP's website at tripnet, tripnet.org, probably in the next half hour or so. So you also will be able to get that recording there. I do see some questions coming in. The first one I see from Phil Drake. Phil, I'll promote you to a panelist, and you should be able to ask your question live of the of our speakers. I'm not sure if we have Phil on the line quite yet.
Well, I think it says, Phil, I believe.
Okay, Phil, looks like we do have you here. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you so much for having this news conference. I was wondering, is there any kind of total in terms of how much money would have to be spent to bring everything up to standards? I didn't know if there's an estimate or anything like that at all in this report.
I'm going to ask the director. We did not have an overall number in the report. Director, anything you can add to that?
And again, I will also redirect because I'd like David to help answer that. We have looked at different spots. We don't have a total overall number. We know that to try to deal, say, with some of just the timber bridges, it could be almost $485 million. To deal with some of the road expansions could be, again, hundreds of millions of dollars. So what we look at in working with both everyone that David had just referenced, MACO, League of Towns and Cities, Montana Contractors, the Infrastructure Coalition, how do we try to start prioritizing that? How do we know we have a big bite in front of us? How do we break that down to what are the priorities? And that's where you've alluded to it, Rocky. We kind of have our priority areas. In the meantime, we still need to maintain all the roads and bridges we currently have, and that all comes from state funding. And so that's where we do have the fun of trying to balance. Even though we did get a fuel tax increase, it helps us, and we're using it and trying to put it out on the roadway, but we're always balancing our maintenance needs and our future needs.
Thank you.
Let me just add one thing, especially in the Helena area there, as you can appreciate, there was two big projects this past season. Both of them were about $10 million a piece. So the Highway 12 East, the widening from 2 lanes, which was not very safe, a lot of head-on accidents and bailouts along the way. That's now 4 lanes with center turn lane. And then the double roundabout and Lincoln Road from Montana Avenue to I-15, that was also about a $10 million project. So you can see how those numbers add up really quick. And especially like the Lincoln Road project really increases the capacity and for sure the safety up there. And of course, Director Long loves roundabouts, so he got 2 for the price of 1 up there. He's pretty pleased with that.
Excuse me, I don't know if I'm still on the air, but was wondering, does the report at all look at rail and the Hiawatha line or the Empire Builder lines going through the state, or did it mostly stick to roads and bridges?
The report was focused on the road, highway, and bridge network across the state.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Next, John Riley with MTN. I'll promote you to a panelist now, and if you unmute your line, you should be able to ask your question. Go right ahead.
Hi there, this is John Riley with Montana Television Network. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I got 2 questions. First one, this would be probably for the panelists. Has recent natural disasters in the state, specifically I'm referencing, the major flooding that we saw in the southeastern and southern portion of the state, impacted funding for some of these, long-term projects that you guys are trying to upgrade and improve out of those, poor or fair conditions?
I'll answer that if I don't mind, David. Yes, no, and maybe. And I know that's not the perfect answer, John, but we are lucky we have a great relationship through MDT in the state with the Federal Highway, FHWA, and they always We don't know what the disasters will be, but we've seen that in the state. We've seen it in flooding up in Millstone in 2011. We saw it this year. We've seen it even way back with the Beartooth Highway. And so the Federal Highways Administration always has a kind of a program placeholder called emergency EA, emergency action, or ER, emergency repair. And so they work with us. So when the floods happened this spring, we were able to work closely with them. We got some advance funding, and that way it doesn't hurt our current year or the next year, what we have in plan for the state transportation improvement plan, which is our 23-24 plan. It will start affecting our budget as we look out in future years, the 5 to 10 year area. That does have some repercussions, but not a lot. The good thing is, as Rocky and David know, we did get a sizable increase with the IIJA, and so that's tempered it a bit. I know what we are doing as a department. We are looking at those, so when we put it back, can we make sure we put it back looking at resiliency, looking at making sure the repairs we make will help make sure this happens. We have runoff every year. Can we make sure we're resilient and planning for a flood event going forward?
Then just as a follow-up question, because as you mentioned, unfortunately, it does seem like a never-ending battle dealing with infrastructure in Montana just because of how big we are. Do you think, given inflation, given the rise of labor costs, the rise of material costs, that current taxation is sufficient to meet those future projects that because I know that infrastructure projects, it's not just a 1-2 year look. Sometimes these are 5, 10, sometimes even 20-year looks.
I'll just start out in general, and then we can, Mac and David can sort of add more local detail. I think what we're seeing across the country is the area you just addressed, which we would sort of call funding sustainability. Part of the challenge is that a lot of the funding is based on fuel taxes, and as vehicles become more fuel efficient, which of course is a good thing, as we see a move towards other energy sources from hybrid to electric vehicles, the funding sustainability part of it is still needs to be addressed. And then when you add in inflation on top of that, unfortunately, key part of the funding source at the federal, but also at the state level, really doesn't address those challenges. And so some real evaluation of how to have a funding system that's sustainable is critical. And that is why, here in Montana, but really across the country, transportation agencies are struggling. Director, if you have anything you can add to that, or David?
Well, I'll add one comment real quick. Sorry, Director. The other side of this is the availability of construction crews. And as we saw with the Yellowstone Park flooding that took place in that area, fortunately, there were 2 different pretty significant contractors in the area at the time. And the MDT and the Federal Highway Administration and the National Park Service proved to be fairly nimble and granted the immediate access and ability for those contractors to get in there and do short-term repairs as well as start to plan some long-term repairs. The work inside the park is very delicate. It involves a lot of permitting and takes, as you mentioned, John, 5, 10, 20 years sometimes. Gravel sources are very, very scarce in some of those areas. And there was a gravel source already inside the park that a contractor was using. And so they were able to use that gravel source of gravel that was already available to immediately address the concern. So that's just another side of all of this, and especially when we talk about natural disasters.
Yep, and I would agree. David's spot on. Your question, John, is an excellent question. I can't answer that. That's why we have a state legislature, and that's why they come from all over the state to help craft that. I do know that we will use, again, we are grateful for what was passed in 2017. We're not asking for any increase in this legislative session. We are going to use everything that we have right now to make sure we keep going forward for the next biennium and for the foreseeable future. I will leave that to people who are much wiser than myself. As David knows, my background, I'm just a simple contractor. I like to build roads, and Team MDT enjoys working with the contracting association and building roads and bridges. That's what we do day in and day out, and we'll keep doing that irregardless of the funding, because I have an opinion that, as you said, John, that we will find it. We will find a way, because like Rocky has said, everyone in Montana knows that this is critical for our economy, for tourism, for manufacturing, for everything that you talked about, Rocky. So I think, though it's not critical now, when it does, we'll all come together like we always do and find a solution that works for Montana and works with our federal partners.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, John. I don't see any other questions at this time, Rocky, so I think we can probably go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah, well, again, I want to thank Director Long and David Smith for taking time out of their days to participate, and also to thank all of those attendees who came in to hear about the report and get information from it. So with that, I see another quick. Phil, did you have a follow-up? I see that Phil's added a. Okay, I guess not. So with that, we're going to conclude the press event. Certainly for myself, we're available for the rest of the day. If you have any follow-up questions, you can get in touch with myself or Carolyn, and we'll be happy to discuss the report further. Again, that concludes the news conference, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky. Thank you, David.